Hello and welcome to episode 40 of the Sweet Lavender Knits podcast. My name is Christine and I'm coming to you from just outside of Toronto, Ontario in Canada. Today is Monday, February the 17th, 2020, and it is a very nice bright day, although I am glad to be indoors. It's nice outside apparently, but I've just been suffering a little bit of a cold and just flu symptoms and a cough, so I might occasionally end up coughing in the middle. I'll try to avoid it as much as I can. So my voice might be a little croaky this time. I hope you don't mind that. Welcome to those that are new and welcome back to anyone returning. I don't have a local knit night to go to, so I've invited you to mine. Why don't you grab your needles, something nice to drink, your favorite project, and let's get started. So first of all, you can find me on social media on Instagram as sweet_lavender1 and on Ravelry as sweetlavender1. You can also find us as a group on Ravelry called the Sweet Lavender Knits group, and we have a thread there called the Let's Chat thread where you can post about anything really, and if you have any questions or just want to share the latest project you're working on, whatever, we have a really nice group of people who will join in and chat. We also have somebody who's one of my viewers who's so kind, who does show notes for us. So if you're looking for show notes for this podcast, for this episode or any of the other episodes, you can find it on the Ravelry group as well. Occasionally we have a knit along going on, and you can join in with that as well. So I think I've covered everything. I can't think of anything else. So why don't we get started with finished objects? So first off, so for the finished objects, I have here a pair of socks. These are the On the Fence socks by Anna. Put up her full name on the screen, who is part of Fishhead Creations, and it is a free pattern on Ravelry called On the Fence, and it is one that is perfect for a beginner who wants to dabble in a little bit of color work in socks. The reason I say that is because one of my viewers had posted a comment saying that they had tried color work in the past, and then the tension was not right, so couldn't get the sock over the foot because of the color work. I can tell you that this pattern actually tackles that, and it's a free pattern, so I can tell you a little bit about it. After the cuff, what happens is that she has a row of increases, and these increases accommodate for the tension of color work. So so it becomes a little wider just for the color work section, and then you do another row of decreases before you go on to the leg and the foot of the sock. And again, the same, do a row of increases before you start your color work before the toe. So now while I'm showing you the socks, you will notice that both the color work on the foot, the cuff, as well as the foot are slightly different. It was not intentional, and I only realized it after I Kitchener stitched my second sock toe, and I wasn't ready to rip it out. So what I've done is I've actually switched it on the cuff as well as on the toes. The reason I will try to sort of explain why it happened is because the pattern was written with the main color being a very light color and the contrast being the dark. And in my socks, it's the reverse. So when I read the chart, I switched it in my mind without realizing it, and I had made the mistake on the first toe and the second cuff, and so they're now sisters and not twins. And I think that's you know, a little different, and so mine are unique, I guess. And this was knit as part of the January socks for the KAL that Kia of Kiasbod is hosting, and she calls it the Free Socks 2020 hashtag. So I will not be knitting a sock a month, although she has been very kind in introducing different patterns, different designers who are not very well known, maybe, who have free patterns. So a free pattern a month for socks throughout the year. So if you are interested in something like that, do go by and join in with her KAL. I will probably pick up a sock pattern when and if I fancy it, if I feel like I need another sock pattern. But for now, I think I have enough socks from last year's knitting of socks, one for every month that I did. And I have other projects that I really want to try. So let's start with our works in progress. Oh, and just before I go on, let me just show you, this is the bag that I had my the sock housed in, and this is how much I have left. So I haven't weighed it out, but I was expecting a lot more to be used up, so I have enough to make maybe a square, and on the square in the blanket, or maybe a couple of stripes on the granny stripes blanket. This is definitely enough for a square as well. So there's enough, and I used, and the idea that Kia had behind the KAL was to use up what you've got. So I think that's nice to be able to shop from your own stash, and not only for the new yarn that you haven't that you need to wind up, but the leftovers of the skeins that you have used up, and maybe you can use up and make up another project. And as much as it's enjoyable to put in stripes into the granny stripe blanket, which is mine right there, it is by no means a blanket yet, so I just use it as a prop in the podcast, just to make it a little interesting in the background. But yes, it's been a while since I've worked on it, just because I feel like I want to put in the yarn in there, and this is just my way, my thinking really is I want to be able to put in yarn in there after I know that I can absolutely not use it for anything else, because the yarn is so, it's precious to me, and I want to be able to use it into projects that we can use, because I find that the blanket is probably going to have a lot of wear and tear in it, and I don't want the yarn to not shine a little bit, if that makes sense. I don't know if that does, but yeah, so I put in the yarn into the blanket once I know that I won't be using it for anything else. And I think these yarns have now been used up in 2 pairs of socks, so it's ready to go in. And this is my project bag that is also ready to put away now. Let me just take a sip of my water. And now we're moving on to works in progress. This is my colorwork jumper that I'm knitting, and it is the Winterfell by Skandir Knits, Ellie of Skandir Knits, and I love this project so much. I've done a little bit of work since the last time I shared with you, and just to show you, this is where I was, that little progress keeper right there with the birthday cake slice. It's a lovely progress keeper from Chapel View Crafts that I got as part of my 12 Days of Christmas Advent over last Christmas. And so I put it in there as to where I showed you last, and since then I've done a few rows. It is colorwork, requires me to read a chart, but the chart is it's easy. So what I do is I usually read the stitches, maybe knit it twice, and then I just put away the chart and knit for the rest of the round before I get to the beginning of the round, which I have marked with a stitch marker, and then I look at the next line again. So it's easy enough to be able to do that. That's what I'm trying to say, is you don't have to follow the chart very carefully. It's not complicated, but it comes out looking really nice, which is, I like the look of it, and I can't wait to get done with the rows. I have a few more rows to do, maybe about this much more, which is what, 2.5 inches maybe, a couple of rows more, and then it's stockinette. So I'm looking forward to that. At that point, I will probably take it as my train knitting, because that'll be easy enough for me to carry. The yarns are the white and the gray. This is actually a very dark gray, and it's heathered. You can sort of see that. Both of those are Elise, and it's a 50-50 of acrylic and wool. And the gray is by Holzgarn. It's their Tides base, and the colorway is called Sterling. So yes, now I'm on to the white and the gray combination of the color work. So every row, it's either a single color or just 2 colors, never 3 colors at the same time so far. So it's a really easy color work project if you're trying, and I think this is one of those jumpers that you can really have, even if you have a little bit of bright color, that you can use it to sort of give it a little pop of color in a more muted background, which is nice. Oh, and by the way, speaking of color work, today I am wearing my Zwag by Caitlin Hunter, my version of it, and I really love this. This yarn is by Cozy Posy Yarn Co., and it is her colorway called Sweater Weather. It's just a speckled color, and I used a mustard called Turmeric on I think it's Debbie Bliss was the yarn, and it was more of a tweedy yarn. I could be wrong, but anyways, it's really nice, and I love the color work. And it's a really nice, it's not too cold outside, but I have been feeling a little flu-ish over the last few days, and you could probably hear a little bit of croaking in my voice. I am feeling a lot better today, but yes, it hasn't been too much of a fun weekend, but that's okay. I got some knitting done, which was nice. Moving on to the next work in progress, housed in my lovely bag by Boku here in Toronto. And this is handmade and hand printed, and I have to say it is lovely. I love the size of this bag, and I feel like it can hold all my projects in the same time, but I wouldn't want to put them all together. But it is such a beautiful bag, and very, very well made. This is my second garment that I have on my needles, and this is my Elton. So just give me a second while I swish the stitches over, and there it is. So it's a little hard to sort of explain to you right now. Let me try and do a good job with it. Okay, so to explain what I've done, the last time I showed you, I have another progress keeper in here, and this is another one of those treats that I got from Chapel View Crafts again. It's what I call a Danish. I don't know what they call, but they are so realistic. Okay, it won't focus, but there it is. Every time I look at it, I'm like, I don't have much of a sweet tooth, but every time I look at this, I feel like I need a Danish. Thankfully, I haven't had too many, because I'm too lazy to get up and actually get one. But there it is. You can see the stripes, which is nice. Okay, and it's sort of blowing out a little bit, but that's okay. The stripes are more important to show off. So there is the stripes. So the lighter is the mohair, and that is by Bordeaux, Milda Bordeaux. It's a UK brand. And the darker, which is sort of looking peachy on the screen, but it's not. It's petal pink, and the colorway is called Bloom by Holzgarn as well. And it is also in their tights base. So this is where I was the last time, and then I knit the rest of it to get my length that I needed before going back and picking up stitches for the right shoulder and doing some short rows and then knitting down. So this is where I am right now, is knitting down towards the back. So yes, I've made a little bit of progress just over the last day or two. And let me tell you, I spoke a little bit about the construction last time, and saying how I was I was so confused by why it needed to be so complicated and, you know, not straightforward. But for anyone who is knitting this Elton and feels like that, just sort of stick with it. It doesn't get any better, I'll tell you. It still baffles me why it needs to be so complicated, but it works out. It works out, so you just need to stick with it. It also, I don't know if she actually tells you what sort of a cast on to use. So maybe just a cable cast on. I'm not sure what the cast on is that she recommended in the pattern, but I chose to do a tubular cast on. Okay, now you can't even see that because this yarn doesn't do justice to the tubular cast on. But that was a mistake. You don't need to do a fancy cast on. The reason I wanted to do a tubular cast on is because I didn't quite understand the construction when I was casting it on, and I just wanted a nice edge, and that's the reason I did the tubular cast on. But you can see, like, it doesn't make much of a difference. It doesn't look like any fancy cast on, really. It's just a sturdy cast on. But because I did the tubular cast on, now I have this ridge on the inside when I had to pick up stitches. So lesson learned for the next one, if there is ever going to be a next one. I don't know about that, but don't do a fancy cast on. You just do your regular cast on. You can even do your, what's it called? Oh, I'm forgetting things, but you know, your slingshot cast on, the usual one, whatever. And you should be fine, I think. But this is what I've done, and so now I have to sort of you know, live with it, really. Well, it's not so bad. But it just causes a little bit of a ridge, which I think would have been avoided if I didn't do the tubular cast on. So, oh well. That's that. I really like the yarn that I'm knitting with. Oh, and then there's this other thing I need to ask you, because I'm not so familiar knitting with mohair, and I know some of you have knit a lot of stuff with mohair, but what do you do when you come across something like this? So what happened is, you know how mohair has its it tends to be very thin in some spots. And of course, now that I'm looking for it, I will never find it. It might be this one here. Okay, this point. So you see this point where I have caught the stitch. However, it's so thin that it might break, and then then the rest of it will just start to unravel right there. I hope you can see that. So what would you do with that? I really don't know what to do. So if you have any tips, just let me know what I have to do, because I want to reinforce it so that it doesn't break. But I have a feeling it probably will. It's so thin at that point. There is a stitch, you can see that, but it's very thin. Okay, so that is that. And on the needles that I'm using for this project are my Leica needles. And I think it's driftwood. They have different names for them. And this is a size 3.5 millimeters. I say all my needles in millimeters. I'm not familiar with the US sizes. I'm sorry. But 3.5 millimeters is what I'm using, and the cord is just my Knit Picks cord. It actually fits on the Leica needle. So that is my second project. I love the Elton. I love the look of it at the end. Right now it's just in stocking knit back and forth, so it's not so bad. The construction, I think it just might be her style of, this is my first, it's actually not my first Hohi's pattern for garments, but it is the first one that I've made so much progress in, because there is another one that I am planning to frog actually. So that it's not any fault of the pattern, it's just that I think I picked a yarn that was not very exciting for me, and it just got a little boring to knit with after a while. So yep, that is that. And moving on to the third work in progress. This one is a design that I'm working on, but I haven't really done a lot. I just started yesterday, and now it is more about sort of like doing the sample stitches, and I've been working on it on just a scrap piece of yarn, but I'll show you what I've done so far. It is this lovely yarn. Oh my gosh, it is very, very nice yarn, and just it's very exotic to me because it has possum in it. It is from New Zealand. It was a lovely yarn that was gifted to me by Perlin, who's Planet Pearl, and she has a podcast as well on YouTube, and she has a Etsy shop, I believe, where she is a bag maker, so she makes project bags, and this is the lovely bag that she made for me. And when she sent me the bag, she gifted me the bag actually, she also sent in yarn, and this is from New Zealand also, and it's called Outlaw. It's a brand I've never used before, and this is on their Bohemia Sport, which is 45% Polworth, 45% alpaca, and 10% possum. It's got possum in the yarn, and I think that's, I'm having more fun just knowing that there's possum in the yarn. It is so soft, and it's very nice tealy green sort of color. And she had gifted me a pattern to go with this yarn, and they were for fingerless mittens as well. So I felt like the yarn needed to be mittens, but I was inspired actually to use the yarn to design a pair of mittens, and I'm doing fingerless mittens, and this is the start of what I've done so far. It's just a cuff, and there will be more, obviously. You know, it's there, but I just was waiting to show you this because I didn't want to ruin the surprise, and you'll probably see it again after the design is done. Yeah, so I have to say I love knitting with this yarn. It's called sport weight yarn, but to me it's like fingering. It's a little bit of a thick fingering, maybe a plump fingering, but it is lovely. Lovely yarn, very, very soft, very soft to the skin, very lovely yarn. And I have a little progress keeper that I got along with my Rick Rack Room bag, and it is a little pine cone. So I really had a lot of fun working on this project, and you know, doing the designing part of it, and it is ready. It's just I need to knit it up now, and hopefully I'll have it ready for maybe mid-March or the end of March, we'll see. And I am, oh yes, and for a change, you don't see me use DPNs too often, but for this project I needed size 3.5 millimeters. I couldn't use any of my interchangeable needles because I only had the one 3.5, and I can't find another pair, and I was already using it for one of the other projects. So I went to my DPNs and I had a 3.5 in that. But of course, with the cuff, I'm starting off to knit with a smaller size needle. And this is a 3mm, I believe. And it goes so well with the yarn. It's coordinated with the yarn, which I thought, oh, that was cute as well. So yes, that is my project. These are going to grow up into be fingerless mittens. And I will show it to you next when it is done. So yes, those are my works in progress. I am really enjoying the knitting that I am doing these days. It's more mindful about what I'm doing, and the fact that even if I have a few minutes to work on it, that I am using it to do something that I love. What are you knitting on? I'd love to hear what you're working on. It could be knitting, it could be crocheting, it could be whatever the crafting you're doing. I would really like to hear about it. I know some of you have switched to different crafts, maybe because you lost your knitting mojo. Don't worry, as long as you're crafting, that's fine. And you know, make sure you're enjoying it. It could be even just coloring in a book, like you know, or sketching or whatever, but don't lose your creativity, because I think that's very important for us in this very mechanical life that we live in, where it's so fast-paced and so busy. It's very important to take time and just slow down a little bit. So I hope you will I hope you won't mind sharing what you are doing with me. And moving on to acquisitions. So I have not been shopping for yarn recently. I've tried to be a little bit more mindful and sort of use up the yarn that I have, because I have quite a bit. This here, the wood structure you can see is an armoire. It's a 3-door armoire. So this is just the end of it here, and there are 3 doors. You can probably see the first door right there, and there are 3 down, 2 further down. It's a big armoire. It's a teak armoire, and it is filled with my yarn and fiber related things, but boxes and boxes of yarn. So I have quite a bit of yarn. What I'm trying to say is, I think it's about time I start using the yarn that I have. It's nice to shop for yarn, but I had that realization that I might not be able to use all of it, even if I knit every day. So I want to be a little bit more mindful in my purchases, and still be able to enjoy. But now, instead of shopping outside, I shop for yarn for my projects from my stash. So it's been a lot of fun too, and I've been I don't like to call it a yarn diet, because it's probably, as soon as I think of it that way, I'll probably end up breaking it. But I've tried to do that since October, and so far, apart from the Advent minis that I've received, I think I've been good. We'll see how long it lasts. It's not something that I'm trying to starve myself away from buying any yarn, but it's just trying to be a little bit more mindful of it. Anyway, coming back to acquisitions. So what I have done is, I was just shopping on Amazon for a few other things that we needed, and I happened to notice that there were some discounts on some of the books. So there are a few books, knitting books, that I've been eyeing for a long time, and I was curious to see if they had any sales on them, and they did. So I picked up 2. One was something I just came across recently, but I thought it would be good to have. But this one here, the Japanese Stitch Bible, is one that I've wanted for a very long time, because I picked up a copy from the library and went through it, and I was totally in love with just how beautiful the stitches were. So to give you a very quick glance at them, but not all of them are very complicated. Some of them are a little more simple, and not everything is a cable. There's lace, there's cable, there's some textured patterns, but just it's not your average stitches. It's a little bit more, and I thought that'll be nice just to add to my little knitting library, I guess, that I have. So that is it. It is the Japanese Knitting Stitch Bible by I thought, oh, by Hitomi Shida. That is the name of the designer, is it, for stitches? The maker of those stitches. The second one is, I haven't taken the sticker off there. It says over 1 million copies sold. And it is Vogue Knitting, the Ultimate Knitting Book. This one was on a very nice, I think it was like 25 or 30% discount. So I grabbed it just because it said it had a lot of the it's like a reference, really. So it gives you different cast-ons, cast-offs, bind-offs to do, how to Kitchener, which I do know, but different grafting methods, different sizing of for garments, or if you were to have if you were to knit a shawl, the different styles of shawls, or the different shapes, maybe different shapes of hats. So they have garments, they have socks, they have hats, they have gloves, mittens, everything really. So I thought it was a very good reference book to have, because yes, you can always look up everything on the internet these days, and that's why I found having, buying books a little redundant sometimes. But I think it's nice to have something in your within your reach when you want to read a little bit more about it. And so it has descriptions, explanations, instructions, no designs as such. Actually, there are a few, maybe 4 or 5 in total, but one for each section. But it's just a nice guide to have. So that is the second thing that I picked up as well. So yes, I am sure I've been chatting a lot. All right, and then just maybe if you were here for the knitting content, that's all I have. I will see you again the next time, which will probably be in 2 or 3 weeks. I try to be regular with these knit nights, but sometimes, life gets in the way. It gets busy. Yes, and then if you are sticking around, it's just a little bit of a chatter from what's been happening over the last couple of weeks. I have really enjoyed my knitting. I have to say, I try to do a little bit more crochet with the Nature's KAL on the Nature's Walk blanket. I've completed 1 or 2 squares. I don't know why I don't bring it here to show it to you, but my project is somewhere else, so maybe the next time. I have to say, knitting is a lot easier on my hands, so I like to do crochet because it is something that I did more than knitting at some point when I was a little younger, when the kids were babies. And now it's more knitting, and I find knitting a lot easier to work with. And so when I pick up a crochet hook, and after I've done a few rounds of crochet on the squares, I get tired. My wrist gets tired. And I think reading chart in crochet has not been something I'm too familiar with in the past. So doing it now, it feels like I need to engage my brain a little bit more, and that's a little tiring. So I can't say I'm enjoying it too much, although I am trying to be a little diverse in my crafts. But really, at the end of the day, it's just whatever you like, right? Whatever makes you happy, whatever you're comfortable with. So yeah, just, that is something that I'm trying. I also love watching. I love watching videos or people who work on quilts, and so quilting is something that I really like. But I don't know why I can't seem to get time. It's not even getting time, it's just getting that the motivation to set up my sewing machine. So my sewing machine doesn't sit on a table. Once I'm done sewing, I pick it up and put it away. So just the thought of sewing means I have to take it, set it up again, and maybe that's why it is. So every time I think about the quilt, and I'm so inspired to, oh, I've cut out all the strips, I've done this, I've done that, now I just need to get it together. And then I think of, having to set up the sewing machine, and then I'm reminded of all of the what do you call, alterations I have to do on different things, projects that I've put aside, like garments, or maybe a blouse or a skirt that I have to alter. And then I get totally, my motivation just goes out the window. It's like, forget it. I don't feel like sewing. So that's unfortunately what's happening. And but the knitting is just, you grab your project bag. I can sit anywhere. I can sit on this chair in my bedroom that I'm at right now, or I can sit on the bed, which is over there, on the bed, and, just do a few rows, and that's okay. That's easy. And maybe that's what I'm doing. So yeah, I have nothing much to say, nothing more to say. It's I am just trying to do what I can and enjoy it as I'm doing it. And February is a short month. It's a leap year this year. Do you have any things that you do on February 29th because it's a leap year? I would love to hear if you have any traditions that you would do. I'm not familiar with any of that. I remember a girl in school, when I was in school, and her birthday was on the 29th of February. And of course, every year that's not a leap year, she would celebrate it on the 28th. But when it was a leap year, she would have a fancier birthday party. And she would say, oh, if it was if it was, she was actually like 12 years old or something, she'd say, oh, I'm only 4 years old or 3 years old or whatever it was, because she said that, her real birthday only came every 4 years. So yeah, do you have anything that you would do for leap year, for the 29th of February? I would like to hear that. It's very nice that, although we are a very small group, that we are so diverse and from so many different parts of the world. When I see, there's this little thing on YouTube that I can go and see where my viewers are. I have them scattered all over, not them, you guys. I have you all scattered so all over, like there's a little bit, there are dots in different, almost all over the world, which is amazing. I have somebody in South America. I didn't know that. I have a few in Australia and New Zealand. I have a few in England, in Europe, maybe Scandinavian countries, and some in Germany. I have some in the Middle East. I'm excited about that. I have a few Canadian and a few in the States as well. So yeah, we're just scattered all. I think I have a viewer in India, maybe. I hope it's, I don't know if it's one of my relatives. Could be. But it's nice. And sadly, I haven't come, I don't know, are any of you from Toronto? Do any of you take the GO train into work? going from east of Toronto into downtown Toronto, because I would love to meet you if that is, if you're up to it. I am a very shy person, but I would love to meet you if that is that is where you live. We could meet up for coffee or something like that, and that would be nice. Because I hear Ellie of Craft House Magic, she has a little monthly meetup, I think it is, with her viewers, some of her viewers, and just having sort of a knit night, and I think that's amazing. And so it's really nice. It's really nice to have you guys all wherever you are, and just the fact that you would take that time to sit down and enjoy a little bit of time watching me and talk about my projects and my sharing what I am working on. So anyways, thank you very much for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful week ahead of you, and I would love to hear what you're working on, and do share with me if you have any questions about any of the projects that I'm working on. Ask me, go ahead and ask me in the comments down below or in Ravelry, and I'll be happy to answer. Thanks again for joining me, and until next time, happy knitting. Bye-bye.